Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the second half of Saturday here at the OpenSim Community Conference. My name is Mal Burns, and this is actually going to be the first of sort of two slightly related lunchtime discussions, as it were. And our theme for this one, at least, is to looking at the new open source and interoperability. This is something that's sort of really emerged recently. I know all of you, well, maybe you don't, but maybe are sort of still in shock over the behavior of Mark Zuckerberg. But the metaverse, whatever it now is, has been very much in focus. And it seems that every corporate body or game body under the sun is apparently building their own metaverse, the implication being that there are now, it's now plural. Charlie Fink put it rather well when he said, well, there's small m's, lots of them, but there's only one big M. Personally speaking, I now refer to everything as cyberspace again. Basically, you can't put the word "the" in front of it, so nobody can sort of take possession of the cyberspace or anything. It simply is, and I think that has been the problem with the latest attempts to define the metaverse and everything, because we make a noun out of it, and therefore it needs a descriptor. Anyway, this is sort of just anecdotal here. What, of course, is quite vital is that in this growing expansion of the cyberverse, whatever you want to call it, is that open source remains strong. This has been the case with the web and all sorts of things online going back when. You have the commercial players, often, who really just hijack a lot of open source stuff that's been done already. I must say there's some of that going on at the moment. But we really feel, and I'm sure everybody who's at this conference, although our concern is largely with OpenSim at the moment, looking beyond the platform we've got here, the model that this platform represents is, as an open platform, and well, just as basically being an open platform, it's this model that we want to hang on to. And in many ways, I also think that whilst people are saying, oh, it looks primitive and it's like Second Life and blah, 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 I think that OpenSim, in many ways, is a great template for the future metaverse or whatever it's going to be called. We have interconnectability, where, we can jump between regions, simulators with the hypergrid. We can communicate across the hypergrid. We can have asset servers and, serving our avatar and other assets literally on our own computer and just jump in online to wherever we want to go. And sure, on the surface, it looks a bit Second Life-y and whatever, maybe looks a bit dated, but the power, the potential under there in the OpenSim code is still a landmark, shall we say. Anyway, one of the major they have a Discord channel, we'll get to that in a minute. One of the major concerns seeking to look at the new open source is an organization called OMI, O-M-I, Open Metaverse Initiative. Yeah, they've got the M word, I know, but never mind. And they've been holding a lot of meetings recently, and they've got lots of different working groups working on different areas. None of them are specific to OpenSim, of course, but they are kind of aligned to what we do. One of the other people who's been present at these meetings, so to speak, is Adam Frisby, who you all know is the co-creator or founder of OpenSim here. And of course, he's behind, Science Space and Break Room. That's the one. Get it right. But he's been turning up there with what I can see is a considerable interest in the movement, for want of a better word. In Kenzo, otherwise known as Eva Henning, is here because she really is the principal spokesman, or spokeswoman, I should say, for Evo. Sorry, OMI.
Yeah.
all these short letter things itself. And finally, we're also joined by Dale Glass, who is really a principal operator over at Vicadia. Now, we had a panel which included Vicadia last year. Vicadia is also, to a great extent, open source. Its particular code base is built on Philip Rosedale's High Fidelity, when it was a 3D world. Almost everything except voice, I think, in High Fidelity got open source. So Vicadia have been pursuing that. There's a couple of other people using High Fidelity's code, but they're not necessarily open source in the same way. So I'd like you to welcome you all here. So welcome, Eva. Or I can't call you in.
You can call me Evo. That's totally fine. And
yeah.
I apologize. I wasn't expecting to be using this username here. So I had a little bit of dysphoria. We talked about that earlier, but it's great to be here with you today. This is, I have not been in any of these open sim worlds, in Open Simulator or in any of these spaces for a number of years. So it's really great to come back and explore here. And Mal, thank you for that intro. I sit as one of the 3 co-chairs at Open Metaverse Interoperability, which is a community group with the W3C. And we're really focused on the connecting tissue between all of these vast worlds. And we think of these galaxies and how they all fit together, and sort of thinking about the vastness of the metaverse as many different ways of being, many different ways of working together, many different realities and different visions of what that can be. And so we're excited to be here with you and to share some of the work we've been working on in open source R&D for an open metaverse.
I'd say wonderful. Well, it's wonderful to have you. And I must say, I mean, over and beyond your meetings, I mean, I keep finding you all over the place. You know, sort of, you may not have been in here, but you've been in an awful lot of other worlds and different things talking online recently. So, yes. And it's funny. Yeah, I feel like I know you as Evo now, even though, you know, in Kenzo, I definitely knew in the old days, but it's almost like you're a different person now, but never mind that. Never mind that.
And that's the conversation we can have here. We are different beings and avatars and these different realities. So it's great to be here with you today.
Yeah. Okay, your voice was cutting out slightly there. I hope we don't have a problem. Okay, I'm going to move across to let Adam introduce himself, I think. Adam, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I think I've been here to a regular staple at these events for the last couple of years. It's nice to be back, and I think that it's interesting to see how open source and the open source philosophy could shape the future of virtual worlds in general. Like Omi has some interesting ideas. I think that there's still quite a few problems that need to be resolved if you want this to be successful. So I'm really happy to sort of elaborate on that as we get into the discussion.
Okay, fair enough. Now, I'm very at my depth with you because you're particularly techie. I mean, as well as being a CTO, you know all this code stuff. And I think, what are they talking about there? Their GTFEs and whatever. But yes, I will come to that shortly. Finally, I'm going to welcome Dale Glass. So Dale, I've already introduced you as being a primary mover over at Vicadia. Maybe you'd like to elaborate a little bit more there, especially about the open source aspect.
Well, thank you for having me here. Yeah, I'm a bit new at this, and I've not actually done very much related to OpenSim in quite a while. So yeah, my first time at this conference, but yeah, thank you. Right, so let's see. Well, you probably already know we are a fork of the now dead High Fidelity, not the one that exists currently, but the previous one, which is confusing. So yeah, we picked it up a couple years ago and still working on improving it and maintaining it and trying to turn it into a better platform. Back when I found it, I thought it was, and it had an amazing potential, and It was a real pity that it actually died shortly after I found it. So I decided, well, that couldn't be allowed to stand. And well, if there were other people that were going to work on it, I will definitely join them and yeah, try to keep things moving. And so here I am.
Wonderful. Well, I've got fond memories of High Fidelity, the 3D world as well. It was another one that showed a lot of potential, and I almost regret that Philip sort of took it down when he did. I mean, he's got very confirmed change of opinion these days, but you know, I keep wondering if it had still been going when COVID came along and we were being forced into online, you know, presence and whatever, whether it would have maybe stood a better chance.
Well, yeah, it was terrible timing, really.
Yes, that's sod's law, as they say in England here. Right, okay. Now, before I move on, and none of you would actually be privy to this, but just before this thing, there was a private Q&A with the developers in an adjacent region here, and it was getting quite volatile when we had to stop it. Basically, a lot of people were criticizing OpenSim for not having good documentation, or if indeed any, and you know, having that feel of being, you know, a bit antiquated, and more importantly, security concerns, which the technical side of which, again, I have no idea, but obviously they were finding sort of holes in it that made it very awkward to present to, say, the enterprise or companies. Possibly those kind of holes are things that ordinary, you know, consumer interfacing world should also consider. But given that what you've all been talking about and doing, I'd like to actually address each of you in both your three worlds, so to speak. How can I put this? Is there a conscientious effort, say at OMI, to actually catalog all these codes and the different strands that are emerging out of that kind of collective, so that as things progress, one can actually move back on that? And to Dale and Adam too, you know, do you really think, is that something we should consider to be very important? I'll start with Eva.
I'm happy to speak to what we've been doing to connect what Neil Trevitt at Kronos Group calls the constellation of standards that touch the open metaverse. So that includes things like WebXR and all of the open web experiences that we are beginning to see bloom in 100 different directions. That includes the GLTF spec and looking at the evolution of programmable 3D assets and how those can be embedded with much more information than what we have done previously with simple models and exchangeable assets. So we're often thinking about interoperability, and I want to take a quick step back here because we're thinking about interoperability to include asset exchange, identity and avatar ability to move between worlds. And so sometimes that's referred to as meta-traversal. And that includes a number of these different elements, right? Can you take your identity? Can you take your inventory? Can you secure your data when you make that transition? So not just the addressability of a 3D world and moving from 2D to 3D in the way that the web is moving, but also how do we exchange metadata between one world to the next? So there's a lot of conversation happening between game platforms, between the open standard groups, W3C, IEEE, Kronos Group, and others. And I'd love for Adam and Dale here to speak more to how they've been helping to guide that process along the way.
Okay, Adam. It's like musical chairs here, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it is. Well, look, I think the original question is on the historical elements, and obviously learning from past mistakes is important. I think one of the things we need to recognize in this industry is that we should be informed by the past by not bound to it. And by that I mean is that There's a lot of ways that virtual worlds work today, the most successful ones, but it's the same way they've been working for 20-something years. And I think that there's some evolutions of ideas that need to be considered as we build these things. But ultimately, yes, I do think that there should be an effort towards cataloging a lot of the old worlds and what they did right and what they did wrong. One of the things that I have been blessed by is the fact that I've been in this industry for now about 25 years. And during that time, I've had the opportunity to learn a lot of mistakes. And one of the things that we see, typically with new virtual worlds, including from the biggest companies, Facebook's previous couple of virtual worlds spring to mind, where people are making the same mistakes that lots of early virtual worlds made, and really running into things that could have been avoided with a 5-minute Google search on why did product X not succeed. That said, I think that in terms of the larger conversation we're having today, I think that the idea of actually having open standards and open interoperable working groups between people is very important. There's really only so many parts of a virtual world that fit together. When you bring things down to the sort of base levels, there's actually only about 4 or 5 different things that actually need to be standardized to build an open virtual world. You need to have content delivery standards. You need to have session protocol standards, so the ability to sort of distribute a scene graph and make sure that that's upgraded and uploaded to all the clients consistently. And you need to worry about a couple of things like asset delivery handling and inventory and things like that. But ultimately, there's not that many bits and pieces. So actually working towards an open standard is quite achievable and is something I think can happen, but obviously requires a lot of buy-in from a lot of players.
Yeah, I think when Eva mentioned the last meetings, they were getting it about a sort of collaborative interest in the Kronos group. I think that was very significant too, because they are they're probably the name that I think of most when it comes to the high end sort of industry involvement, as it were. Dale, your thoughts on all this?
Well, so let's see. First of all, kind of a bit of a disclaimer, I suppose. Not sure if there's much of awareness of how we work, but we're not a company. Vircadia is pretty much a volunteer group made entirely of volunteers, and so even being at least theoretically, on the top of it, I don't really have the capability of giving orders to anybody. Like, I can, of course, ask for a favor or something, but I'm very careful with such things because, well, nobody's an employee, including people, members of the core group. Right, so for that reason, we are not going to make any kind of binding promise regarding which is our official direction or whatnot. Like, there's certainly people with interests in various things, but we don't force anyone to work on anything. And it's basically, in the end, up to somebody being personally interested in picking something up.
Sure.
Right, but yeah, definitely there is some interest in standardization and interoperability and compatibility. Yeah, we use GLTF, for instance. So yeah, that's one area of interest. We use Common Codecs. We've actually implemented support for the Opus codec in Vircadia, which is something High Fidelity didn't have. High Fidelity actually has something of its own, which is proprietary and not compatible with anything else. Right. It has interesting characteristics, but yeah, it's closed source, so not good for us. We've also looked, and a member of the community also looked into the underlying protocol for Vircadia, well, High Fidelity, what it was. It's based on something called UDT, which is a standard, and does have an implementation, a standard implementation, but our actual implementation is not entirely standard. So yes, so there is that one issue. With one of the things that we'd probably have to do at some point is bringing ourselves into compliance with the actual standard. But since we're actually kind of not properly implementing the existing standard, but at least it's not a completely novel invention. So the possibility of bringing things into compliance is a possibility. Right. So on matters like OpenSim, well, I think there's not much hope of very much exchange, except for things like models, textures, and so on, because it's a completely different foundation. So we're not using the same protocols. We don't think there's ever going to be a possibility of somebody teleporting from Wikipedia to OpenSim without effectively running two different programs underneath.
Yeah, I'll also ask quickly about one Wikipedia, because I know this was the case with High Fidelity. I don't know how much we would consider this to be part of a template, but earlier on we had Fredericks, or I can't pronounce his name, speaking about Outworld, and I have an installation, like 25 regions, and they run on my own local computer, not the one I'm talking on now, in fact, just a spare one. But it means the server with all my assets in OpenSim and my avatar and everything else is on my own computer, and it travels out with me. And essential stuff travels out pretty fast across the hypergrid. Other stuff is a bit slow, and some stuff I can never get when I'm out on the hypergrid. But the idea that my world and the interface of my world, as it were, is on my own system, it's like being in my room. And in the real world, I go out my door when I want to go somewhere. So to me, having my OpenSim installation on my own computer is very much the same thing in cyberspace terms. I just go through, well, Portal actually, or something, to go to the location I want to go to, do what I want, pick stuff up maybe, and then return home into my own computer and then log out from there. It also reduces a lot of stress on the server that I might be visiting, because I visit there as a presence, but I don't necessarily bring all my assets with me. I only really bring the essential stuff. So I think that is still the case with your platform, Dale, isn't it? That the user basically has a kind of offline starting point, and then they move into the online component. Or have I got this wrong completely? Or have I just confused things no end?
I'm not quite sure.
Okay, well, I'll also ask, I mean, this is not a question for Ivo or Adam's own platform, but both Ivo and Adam, if you've got any comments, do you think that is an important part of maybe generating a sort of part of the infrastructure by which, a mass market of people could enter a metaverse, whatever you call it? For example, could the Windows desktop or the Mac desktop actually be the portal you move outward from?
Absolutely. The web-based experiences are one of the easiest ways to scale to the globe, because if you look at the number of VR headsets out there, it's not going to be right. It's going to be through browsers. It's going to be through other mechanisms, not just through VR. And if you're thinking about what is the easiest, most portable and lightweight way to do that right now, we look at, there's a number of WebXR-based experiences that are being tied together. For example, art galleries that work across more than one platform and have built agreements around getting to move from one platform to the next. Now, those are very early stage, sort of alpha level experiments, not even beta yet, right? So this is early stage stuff, I would say, for most of us. Most of the folks working on the web-based sort of portability and traversal between worlds are maybe not aware of what has happened here for the last 12, 15 years now, right? I mean, this particular code base is one right place for experimentation for doing some of this as well. And I think there are ways in which we could bring our communities together to do more interesting interop experiments down the line. There's definitely some things happening between closed communities and sort of open web-based communities right now, and agreements are being made. I think it's going to happen partially through federated, small to medium-sized communities taking on sort of an anti-meta or a different meta-narrative approach. There's lots of different ways to approach these spaces, and I think we're going to see lots of fun iterations in the next year to come.
Yeah, it's a bit of a be-all and of everything, really, isn't it? I mean, that's why the attempted definitions of the metaverse has been, whoa, everything. Everything that isn't in the organic universe is the metaverse. Interesting. I mean, another thing I'm wondering about, and it would particularly relate to smaller and medium-sized concerns and OpenSim, is whether maybe we can best perceive the metaverse or cyberspace from the small bits piled on top of each other, rather than the big overwhelming thing that's trying to suck things into it. In other words, a Skype call could technically be, you could say, well, that's part of the metaverse, because you could be having it in a virtual world, or you could be having it in your desktop, or you could be having it on the web. And it is a form of communication, but it's a form of communication that is by and large audio and video only. It doesn't include avatars. But, many spaces that people meet, and Evo, this, we've got the clubhouses and Twitter spaces, and we've got things popping up everywhere that are constantly running audio conversations, basically, but probably as good as this, Are those little things, and for example, an independent asset server or something like that, do you think maybe we should be looking at that kind of system? I mean, I remember Bruce Joy from VastPark many years ago started an open avatar system. It didn't get very far, but basically his idea was like a marketplace. They would host an avatar for you, they'd host assets, but they didn't give a world to use them in. They were simply the server that hosted things on your behalf that you could take with you, if you see what I mean.
And Ready Player Me is doing some level of that right now. Yeah. I think we're absolutely going to see VRM, for example, become a much more open, not quite a standard, but adopted by many of us. Certainly, it's already been adopted in Asia, and becoming more so when you're looking at avatar portability. We're experimenting right now in a couple of different methods. I think there's no real great single marketplace right now for open avatar experimentation, but Ready Player Me is definitely serving part of that space.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Ready Player Me, they allow you to take a photograph of your face on the web, and they make an avatar for you. But more importantly, when you log into their site, it's like a destination guide for everywhere you can go and take that avatar. All sorts of different companies, different worlds. You just you effectively teleport with your Ready Player Me avatar to wherever they, right. It's acceptable. Sorry. Oh,
I was going to say, that just building on decentralized identifiers and these sort of open. That's not necessarily a marketplace, but it's becoming one very quickly. So I think we will see lots of marketplaces growing over the next cycle.
Now, Dale also mentioned that he couldn't see any way that, say, OpenSim here, where we're sitting, as it were, would easily operate with something like Vicadia, even though both are, of course, open source. But, pardon me, cough. I have often imagined, I'm getting far too old to build these things or even try, but I've often imagined, say, building a studio, maybe, or getting it built in Unity or Unreal or something like that, and modeling it in such a way that I can put a duplicate of it in multiple worlds of my choice. But I'd hopefully have the same avatar in each as well. But more importantly, the idea I sort of had was whether it would be possible to put scripts and things like that in the build, embedded in the build, that would independently talk to other instances of itself, for example, even if that self was on a different platform. The container, like an object on the web, would be embeddable all over the darn place, but inside the container will be the mechanisms for communication with other instances of itself, or just back-end things. Now, how attractive does that sound? I'll put this one to Adam first, because he's probably got a better grip on what I'm talking about there.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned this, because I think just last week I volunteered to to run the WASM, which is the WebAssembly scripting working group for OMI. I think that it's possible to do. There's some limitations here, and I think that we need to also be aware of that. Until we have got a standard system that everyone is using, and I think that's very, very important, actually. I don't think we should be focusing on a technology layer that is broken into lots of tiny little pieces and fragmented, and there's a reason for that. I'll come back to that in a second if you're interested.
Yeah.
But in terms of scripting itself, the problem is that sometimes platforms have got different capabilities and different feature sets. Sometimes they've got different ways they're accessed. Sometimes, for instance, they're focused entirely on VR headsets, whereas other ones may be focused on, say, a mobile touchscreen device. And then you've got lots of problems like, how do you interact with these things? Is there a requirement for having hand movement simulated, for example? So there is some lots of question marks here about sort of how well these things would work if interoperated, but it is absolutely something I think at least the groundwork could be laid, and that's something I'm looking forward to sort of championing over the coming year or so, particularly with that working group and others.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Carry on.
Yeah. So I'm kind of thinking here. On the level of scripts, at least, we're not really interoperable with OpenSim in that we use JavaScript. So yeah, that's not exactly LSL. It's not .NET either. But yeah, there's certainly opportunities for lower kinds of interoperability. Even if you can't, for instance, teleport right from one world to the other. Some things certainly could be done. You could do things like streaming video. You could transmit chat data via scripts, certainly. We've got, for instance, support for web surfaces, so you can embed just a web page anywhere inside the world. So that's one option to interpret.
Can I interrupt? Can you embed a web surface on an avatar itself?
Never tried, actually.
Never tried it. Yeah, I know.
I don't think so.
I'll
anyway,
come back to that. I was thinking something. So, yeah, okay.
I can say that does work in ScienceSpace.
Yeah, well, back in the days, so I'll just interrupt you briefly here if I can, Dale. Back in the days of, I guess it was Second Life, you know, avatars used to appear and they were white with the words missing all over them because they couldn't find any of the kit. But people, you know, I used to have a T-shirt in Second Life and maybe a jumpsuit or something as well, where I could put media on the prim that was the costume or the body. And it suddenly occurred to me, I don't know whether they've really tried doing this, but, you know, all the future talk is about, you know, away from avatars and more towards holograms. If you had an avatar that was plain, obviously it has some motion sensor in it and whatever for gestures, where the actual skin of the avatar was somehow mapped from, you know, this is not home computing stuff at the moment, but like 360 cameras could pick up, like the way they pick up 3D, you know, video shots, and they could map that texture to the avatar. So to all intents and purposes, your avatar would look like a hologram. But do you get what I'm getting at? So I rather fancy that.
I actually just got a message, and people are watching the stream.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can actually, yes, indeed, put a web surface on an avatar. I never tried myself, but.
You know, sometimes these little things can be quite disruptive when they get going. Yeah.
But yeah, I actually had another kind of interoperability suggestion in mind. Yeah. So one of the strengths of our architecture is that the scripting can control pretty much everything. So you can create virtual avatars with scripting very easily. So for instance, one kind of way of having some sort of interoperability could be transmitting data about an avatar from one side to the other. Like you could reproduce movement and have kind of an avatar of an avatar basically in the other place. I'm not sure how well that would work in practice, but something like that would be definitely possible.
Incidentally, for those of you who don't particularly know me, this avatar I'm wearing here is identical to my avatar in Science Space and Breakthrough. It's identical to my avatar in Vicada, I believe, Antivoli. And in fact, I think, and here, I think actually Sansar is the only platform I really use now that doesn't support this avatar. So, you know, there's some comfort in knowing that I'm going to look the same wherever you find me.
Mal?
Yeah.
What was your workflow? What did you use as your base? Did you start in Ready Player Me?
Oh, the avatar. No, this particular avatar, well, to be honest, I don't know whether it's in the audience, but there's a chap here at Avacon who did it for me. We used what we did it jointly. We went into, it was a piece of Adobe software, I forget what it was called. And, you know, he asked me what I wanted. And I said, oh, a bit of red hair, a bit of beard there, a leather jacket. Because all these nowadays are wearables. It's all part of the overall mesh. And when we got it about right, we sort of exported it and brought it into OpenSim. And then I managed to upload that into Sciencebase. And yeah, then I uploaded it into High Fidelity, when Philips High Fidelity, when it was a world. And then when High Fidelity went away, I think I managed to find it by default in, certainly it was either in Vicada or Tivoli or both. So, you know, I begin to get familiar with it, you know, and it's because it's a single mesh. I mean, there are limits. I can't sort of put on OpenSim clothing on top of it, or well, I could, but it looks stupid, you know. But I keep wondering, well, what could I put in this mesh? You know, the mesh is like an outline framework with its texture and everything else. But there's something I had in Second Life years ago called the brain. And you had, you know, you bought it or whatever, and you wore it. But it was worn on the inside of your stomach somewhere, and it allowed anybody coming to your virtual house to find out where on the grid you were by showing you on a map, because the brain was reporting your position anywhere on the grid, and it did other things too. You know, so it's a good example of, you know, I'm wearing this invisible thing inside my mesh body that is doing all sorts of surveillance on me, I guess is the word. But, right, let's get back a bit more focused on track here then. So yeah, interop. Ivo, you know probably as much as I do. There was on our on the Lord, see if I can get the window I need open here. Is it called Red Eagle? Is on our OMI group there. He's from. Sorry, do you know who I mean?
I do. We have so within OMI we have hundreds, almost 1,000 active people in the Discord now, including platform holders, people who work for game platforms and companies, people who work on the association layer or on the standards layer, as well as sort of every layer of the stack. So yes, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'm referring here quickly to back, in fact, to here, Red Eagle PI, I think the avatar is called. He would have been here, actually. He's super interested in what we're doing, but if you've only got to look at his server, and there's, I think they came more from gaming than virtual worlds, but they've got so many meetings and chats going on that, you know, you couldn't get here because one was finishing and another was starting, all on their own server. But what I liked, they're called OCEM, and I wish, I'm trying to see if I can, not easy. But the interest, here we are, right, there stands for the Organization for Cooperation on an Ethical Metaverse. And this is one of the subjects I want to bring up, even though he's not actually here, is, you know, it's very easy to look at these big corporations moving into things now and realizing that, you know, hell, you know, Meta, you know, is they're at war with the European Union, they're at war with the British government now. They've got the Trade Commission people in the States looking into them. But, you know, I wonder how on earth they get away with it. And I think it's Grady Booch who has the same tweet posted every day saying that Facebook is a profoundly unethical organization and it all starts at the top. That's a standard daily tweet, our headline. If we're going to build open source and stand to be something that can stand up to these big corporations, I'm talking in a more philosophical sense here now, how important is it that we kind of build a kind of ethical foundation to all this, where we can actually maybe take the high ground and say to the likes of Zuckerberg, we're in the right place. So okay, take it in turn, folks. So let's start with Adam on this.
This is a really interesting and slightly dangerous topic, actually, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because there's an unspoken question of whose ethics are you going to be using here. Now, I think that it's fair to say that harvesting everyone's data and selling it to the highest bidder is not going to fall into the boundary of ethical for most people. But I think it is something that to be very careful of. My ideal model for governance is always looking at the older internet governance. That is that sort of even still used today, but that sort of period that was that architecture that was mapped out in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, in particular, that sort of divided the network up and basically gave everyone control of their own space. There were some basic rules for playing nice with each other when you connect to the larger environment, but generally speaking, it tried to stay out of these questions as much as possible. And I think that that's the right model today, because it always gives you the freedom to not use someone's product, not use someone's service, and move to a different environment entirely. For instance, if you don't like Facebook or Twitter, you can use something like Mastodon, which is open source and relatively sort of grassroots, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think that model is the thing to follow when it comes down to this thing. This is the second question you asked, which was sort of how do you make sure that succeeds versus the one platform dictated by the one company. And the answer to that one is that you've got some tailwinds here anyway. A lot of companies learnt some lessons, particularly during the mobile software era, which we've just gone through, that it's really dangerous having one or two companies in charge of the entire ecosystem. With mobile, we've got that duopoly of Apple and Android, and you can easily see how the platform operators abuse their positions. Some abuse it more than others. I won't name names, but it's pretty obvious you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of tech companies who have had to fight with them over the last couple of years and have gotten very, very wary of signing up to being just a participant in someone else's walled garden.
Yeah.
So I think that when it comes down to the metaverse, you're going to find that big companies are actually quite willing to latch on to open standards if it means that they're going to be able to compete fairly on their own without having to deal with platform operators.
And if the standards they're adopting work, which of course is a major part of it. Yeah, I noticed, for example, both Nike and Reebok have joined the so-called N-word, and but they've both chosen to do it not to start their own platform, but to do it via, I don't know, Fortnite or something like that. So you're already getting this sort of corporate move in via a platform that's already there, as opposed to people like Meta creating their own. Right. Did you have any thoughts on that particular topic quickly, Dale? We are running short on time here.
Well, so in that regard, I think we have to quickly explain the differences here. Wikipedia is very radically decentralized in its nature. Like we don't have a grid as such. We don't have an asset server. We don't have even a centralized account system. Basically, we don't have an account server, but its usage is completely optional. Yeah. And all the regions are pretty much like independent web servers. Like they exist inside the internet, but they are actually bound to each other. We don't even have crossing from one region to another. You can teleport, but there's no sim borders like in OpenSea.
Yeah, there's not that flat world thing where you can walk for hours.
Yeah. So that's in some regards that's a disadvantage. But in the regard of making it safer for various different kinds of communities coexisting, I think it's a bit of an advantage. We, for instance, have no ability whatsoever to ban you from all of what is Vercadia? Like we could ban people from our own kind of organization regions. I can ban you from our basically, from our development meetings. But absolutely nothing stops you from taking our code, setting up a server, and talking to whoever you want to talk, including people who show up at our meetings. So that's basically, it's an imitation of the web, right?
It's a bit like the self-hosted OpenSim instance I mentioned.
Kind of like that. In some regards, it's a disadvantage in that we have difficulty hosting content. But we do think it's going to have an advantage in organizational.
Okay. Right. Well, I need to start wrapping. Ivo, did you have any thoughts on the
most of them in the chat, just on the half of the conversation, recommending the work of srsi.org. Obviously Ken Bai's work, and then thinking about protocols as well as standards. Obviously, there's a lot of interesting research to be done here. There's one of our colleagues at OMI, Dr. Kim Nevelstein, has published his doctorate on IPSME, which is a protocols-based approach. And he's getting interesting results, for example, working between Minecraft and other worlds. So there's some very interesting research. This is a ripe field for discovery right now, and I think about what you're going to work on as all of you here are getting excited for your own research and labs.
You're right. It is an exciting time, and for somebody who's going all over the place all the while, suddenly stumbling on things and thinking, oh great, this is happening, even in the face of corporate takeovers and stuff like that. So
and these metaverse experiences are so vast. Like there are whole solar systems that might be meta created or Oculus driven that I'm never going to go see, and that's okay, because not everything has to be interoperable for it to be connected and potentially available to everyone. And I just see that we have it available, and it's also really accessible for everyone.
Yeah, even something as small as Second Life is vast, because no one person could walk the terrain of Second Life in a lifetime.
Right. And
I bring every square foot kind of thing. It's huge. You can jump to where you want to go, so no problem. But you couldn't walk it. Anyway, I'm going to have to cut you guys off because I've got about 2 minutes to wrap, and I did want to put out some pointers here. I'm just actually got my Discord open. Firstly, just it's a plug, but it's an open source project really. Discord servers are wonderful things. Basically, it was built for gaming, but it works just as well for virtual worlds. I can even see. I don't know, Sansar will have a channel, a server on Discord. Their users can talk together, but ultimately at the end of the day, maybe people will be able to jump from Discord to some kind of URL that would take them to a location in Sansar, and the same with Vercadia or anything else. That's down the line. But there are so many of these servers around, and they don't all just belong to platforms. Obviously, we've talked about OMI, which has a server. The OCEM, this is the Ethical Metaverse people, they have one. And 1 minute to wrap. Yes, I know. Panic. Reacting to the background here. Oh yeah, and there's another server which I haven't had time to ask anybody about here today, called the Open 3D Foundation, and they have a Discord server.
Yeah, and they're colleagues and friends of ours. We are really just fantastic collaborators all over the world, and so. We just want to invite you to be a part of that ongoing collaboration. The questions y'all are asking in the chat here are fantastic, and they are exactly the questions we need to be asking around decentralized identifiers, around metadata, around privacy, and around how we work together to do this.
Yeah. Okay. If you can put it in chat for me. I'm terrible at reading chat while I'm actually broadcasting, so I can tell I've missed a whole load streaming by here. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and hope we've been useful in what we've been talking about and everything. As I said, this is sort of a bit of a two-part thing. I'm going to be here at the same time tomorrow. Maybe one of these two will drop in. I don't know, but I'll be hosting one with Dusan Reiter and Dr. Fran Babcock, And the focus of that one be looking towards the future from a more global sense. Today's been more about the open source code and, the basics. But where we're going generally is going to be more the sort of thing I talk with Fran and Dues and Writer about. So I hope you can attend that one too, and hope you've enjoyed this one. And, well, bye for now. Thank you to all of you, Ivo, Dale, and Fran. Adam.
Yeah, thank you for having me here.
We'll get cut off.